Axel could hear the remnants of the afternoon spring rain dripping down the storm drain next to his ear. He strained to open his eyes and watched the scarlet ribbons of life mingle with the dirty water and disappear into the rusty iron grate. If he had had the strength, he would have laughed at the irony. His life, both in the physical and metaphorical sense, was rolling downhill. The coolness of the sidewalk against his cheek was soothing. He was ready. More than ready to face the inevitable. Axel was just closing his eyes one last time when he heard the shuffling of feet and excited voices. Suddenly, he felt people gathering around him. They began pushing and shoving, tearing at his clothes. Lord, he thought, can't you let me die in peace? The next moment, he realized he was being lifted up. He groaned in pain. He mentally shouted to them, "Don't you know I'm dying? Leave me alone." He felt a slight breeze on his face as he was carried to the waiting car. Voices were heard again. "Hang on, mister. We're taking you to the hospital." And then the siren sounded. "God, let it end, please," he pleaded. He was cold, and what lay on top of him resembled a piece of sandpaper. The sensation jogged his memory, and he went back in time to his last vacation. He could feel the sand under his feet, lying on the beach and watching his wife and daughter laugh and play in the Caribbean surf. He thought that if he tried really hard, he could go back to that time, but something kept him from focusing. What was that incessant beeping? He struggled to open his eyes and blinked several times at the bright light before he realized his surroundings. He was in a hospital room, which explained the overly sanitized scratchy sheets. Sitting next to the bed was a woman he had never seen before. When she saw that he was awake, she stood up and gently placed her hand on his forearm. She told him everything was going to be okay, as if it was supposed to be. He had no idea who she was until she thanked him for saving her life. Memories began to come back to him. He walked out of the bar half drunk and saw two guys roughly beating a woman. She was screaming and trying to break free. If there was one thing he hated, it was men abusing a woman. And the fact that there were two of them only made it worse. He rushed to her aid and punched the first attacker in the jaw, sending him to the sidewalk, but no sooner had he turned to the second than he felt a hard shove to his side. The pain caused him to involuntarily roll over onto his back. He was grabbed and turned around to face the first attacker, who was already on his feet. Axel had time to see the flash of a steel blade before it disappeared into his stomach. "Come on," he heard one of them shout. "Grab his wallet, and let's get out of here." They had arrived just in time. They had saved him from loneliness and despair. Of course, this was before hell had opened, and these young men had come and saved his pathetic life. As his consciousness cleared, he realized that the woman had spoken. He looked up at her and saw tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to thank you. At first, they just wanted to take my purse. I gave it to them, but then they decided to take me with them. They were trying to get me into their car when you jumped them. You saved my life," she repeated between sobs. She picked up a tissue and wiped her eyes. At that moment, a nurse entered the room. "Sir Galahad is awake," she announced with a smile. She turned to the other woman. "Excuse me, Barb. The doctor will be in a few minutes to examine him. It will take some time and the patient will need more rest after that. I think you'd better go home and rest. We'll take care of Mr. Lionheart and he'll be in better company tomorrow." Sorrow leaned over and kissed him gently on the forehead. "I'll be back tomorrow," she told him. The nurse took his medical records from the foot of the bed. "Well, we can't keep calling you Sir Galahad, can we? I need your full name, address, and next of kin." "Do we really need to do that?" he asked. "I'm afraid we do," she replied. "Barbara said the two guys who stabbed you took your wallet. I tried to check your cell phone for your wife's number, but I'm afraid it was broken during the scuffle. I can't even turn it on, and we need your information for records and insurance." He took a deep breath and let it out with a long sigh. Axel Brolin, 358 Prospect Road in Arlington Hills. No immediate relatives. "No one?" she asked, pulling away from the partially filled-out medical form. "No, no one," he replied. "I'm insured with United through my job. I have no idea what my number is, but I'm sure they'll give you one if you call the office." He gave the middle-aged nurse the name and phone number of his employer. After getting his personal information, she began taking vitals and entering the results into the chart with a smile. "Okay, Mr. Brolin, that's all we need for now. The doctor will be here soon to examine you, she explained as she left the room. Nah. He closed his eyes with a sigh and lowered his head onto the pillow. Damn do-gooders, he thought. Why can't they leave me alone? So what now? What the hell am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? He was just beginning to envision a life without his wife and daughter when the doctor entered the room. When can I get out of here? He asked angrily. The doctor stopped and looked at him in surprise. Is that any way to talk to the man who just saved your life, Mr. Brolin? Yes, thank you very much, he muttered. And for how long? A few days, the doctor replied curtly. Irritated by the patient's attitude, he moved on to his question. Mr. Brolin, your chart indicates that you have no close relatives, but you were wearing a wedding ring when you were brought in. It's in a bag in the closet. Do you want me to show it to you, or are you going to keep lying to us? Axel thought for a moment before answering. It was obvious that he had pissed off the doctor, but even after everything that had happened, he realized that it wasn't the doctor's fault. He was only trying to help, and it wouldn't be fair to take his anger out on the man who had saved his life, whether he wanted to or not. He decided to apologize and come clean. I'm sorry, Doc. You're right. I'm married, but I don't want my soon-to-be ex knowing that. You see, hours before I was stabbed, my wife informed me that she was leaving me for another man. Also, my 16-year-old daughter told me she was going to live with her mother because the guy had a ranch with horses, and she wanted to live on the ranch. I don't know if you've been through anything like this, Doc, but it can literally destroy the will to live in a person. When I was lying there dying, you know what I felt? Gratitude. I was thankful for the people who stabbed me. I thought they saved me from a lonely, miserable life. And then you went and saved me, he said with a chuckle that made his gut ache. Don't laugh, the man in white said, trying to lighten the mood a bit. The stitches are still quite fresh. Axel only smiled. I'm sorry for what you've been through, Mr. Brolin, but are you sure you don't want us to contact your wife? Who knows, maybe she'll change her mind, especially after she finds out what a hero you are. I don't feel like a hero, Doc. There was desperation in his voice. It was deeply disturbing. Are you having suicidal thoughts? The doctor asked in a concerned tone. No, I very much doubt I would have the courage to do it myself. That's why I was so grateful to these guys. I'll tell you what. You may not consider yourself a hero, but the woman you saved certainly does. The first night you were here, she absolutely refused to go home and slept in that chair all night. The first night? How long have I been here? You were brought in Thursday night at 8:40. You were in surgery for 6 hours. The stab wound in your side barely grazed your kidney and didn't do much damage, but the wound in your abdomen ripped out your colon and a chunk of muscle tissue. It looks like the guy was purposefully moving the knife to do as much damage as possible. The good news is, you don't need a bag. A bag? A colostomy bag. We were able to repair the colon. You'll be as good as new in a little while, but I'm afraid you'll have to eat baby food for a while. Great, then back to my question. How long have I been here? Oh, sorry, Doc grinned. It's Saturday, noon. Saturday, what happened to Friday? It's just one of life's mysteries, I guess, he grinned again. Actually, we didn't want you to move, so we kept you under sedation for a while. And this woman was here the whole time? Yes, the whole time. From what I understand, she left just a short time ago. I think she'll get some sleep and come back early tomorrow morning. Now I need to examine the stitches, he said, pulling back the sheet and sliding Axel's hospital gown open to expose the wounds. He made notes on Axel's chart and hung it back on the foot of the bed. Everything looks good, Mr. Brolin. Just try not to move around too much. The nurse will bring you some jelly in a few minutes. He turned to leave, then turned to face the patient again. I'm truly sorry for your troubles, Mr. Brolin. Please, if you have suicidal thoughts, let me or one of the nurses know. Working in my clinic, you'll learn what life is all about. It will work itself out, Mr. Brolin. Give it time. Axel couldn't help but scoff at the doctor's parting words. Julie Brolin had already packed one suitcase and was stuffing what she could into the second when she looked up and saw her daughter standing in the bedroom doorway. Mom, have you heard from Dad? I've tried calling, but all I get is his voicemail. Maybe I should stay here until he gets home. No, you're not staying here, Carrie. Your father is a grown man. He can take care of himself. I know he's suffering, but there was no easy way to tell him that. Do you think he'll ever talk to us again? Of course he will, dear. Maybe not to me, but you're his daughter. He won't leave you. He loves you. Even from 10 feet away, she could see tears appear in her daughter's eyes. She walked over and hugged her only child. It's going to be okay, sweetheart. Right now, your father just needs to be alone. But you know him. In time, he'll probably forgive us both. She tried to sound convincing, but she knew they had hurt him deeply. She was sure he hadn't expected this turn of events and almost wished she had hinted to him along the way about her infidelity. Perhaps he wouldn't have taken it so hard. She wished she could have comforted Carrie longer, but it was time for them to leave. She prayed Axel would stay away long enough for them to escape without another confrontation. She kissed her daughter on the top of her head. Jim and Chandler will be here in an hour. Carrie went back to her room, wiped the tears from her face, and slowly continued packing. But she was having trouble concentrating. She kept remembering the look in her father's eyes when she told him she wanted to live on the ranch with her mother. He seemed to be dying right before her eyes. She picked up the phone and tried calling again, still nothing. She was beginning to wish she had never seen Chandler Freeman. If she hadn't seen him, she wouldn't have fallen in love with him. Wouldn't have spent all her free time hanging around him and trying to get him to pay attention to her. If she had never seen him, she wouldn't have introduced his father to her mother. But when they both showed up at the school fete, the opportunity was too good to pass up. If they became friends, she'd have more opportunities to be with Chandler, her lover. If she never saw him, she wouldn't have to make excuses for her mother's secret affair with Mr. Freeman, wouldn't have to cover up her mother's infidelity and lie to her father. She was so absorbed in her little unrequited affair that she didn't think about how it might affect her parents. She didn't think about the fact that her mother might fall in love with Chandler's father and want a divorce. She tried to call her father again, but again went to voicemail. By the time Chandler and his father arrived, all of their personal belongings were packed into several boxes and 5 large suitcases. Jim Freeman put his extended cab pickup truck in the driveway. Chandler wanted to jump out of the car, but his father stopped him. "Stay here until I make sure everything's okay," he told his son. "Julie said her husband left a couple days ago and she hasn't heard from him since. That scares me a little bit. As soon as I make sure everything's okay, I'll have you help me load the truck." He approached the house cautiously. Carrie was still upstairs, but Julie heard them pull up and met him at the door with hugs and kisses. Pulling away, he lowered his voice to almost a whisper. "Is he back yet?" "No, I still haven't heard from him. I'm starting to get a little worried myself." Carrie tried calling him several times but only got voicemail. She's left a few messages, but still nothing. She looked up the stairs to make sure her daughter wasn't within hearing distance. "I hope he hasn't done anything stupid." Right now, Carrie is thrilled with life on the ranch, but if anything happens to her father, she'll probably blame me. "Do you really think he's capable of that?" "I don't know. I've never seen him like that, Jim. It was bad enough when I told him I was going to file for divorce, but when Carrie said she was coming with me, it was like all the light went out in his eyes." "Well, if you can't reach him, there's not much you can do. Let's hope he's found himself a girlfriend," he commented with a slight chuckle. "Yeah, I doubt that very much. Axel is a good man. I never worried about him cheating on me." The last thing he wanted to hear about was what a good man Axel was. Changing the subject, Jim poked his head out the door and called out to Chandler to help with the boxes. "We better start packing up the truck. Are you sure you have everything you need? We have no idea if you'll be able to come back here when we leave." "Yes, I have everything, but I'll run upstairs and remind Carrie." Julie ran upstairs while Chandler and his father made their way to the truck with a bunch of boxes. When she got to her daughter's room, she was sitting at her desk writing. "Honey, are you almost ready? Chandler is already here. They're loading the truck." "I'm writing a letter to Daddy," she replied, with tears in her eyes. She raised her eyes to her mother. "Mom, are we doing the right thing? He looked so hurt," she said, and started crying again. Mom came over and hugged her. "Life can be hard sometimes, honey, but we have to do what's best for us, even if it hurts others sometimes. Things will get better, sweetheart. You'll see. Your father is a godsend. As soon as the female population finds out he's single again, they'll start knocking on his door," she said with a slight chuckle. "Do you think so?" "Oh, my dear, there is no doubt about it. He will soon be happily married again." "I do hope so, Mother. I keep thinking about how I lied when Dad came home from work and said you were out with your girlfriend. even though I knew you were with Mr. Freeman. I feel so guilty. Please don't feel guilty, honey. I'm the one who asked you to do this. None of us knew at the time how it would end. If we had known, maybe we would have handled it better, but honey, there's nothing we can do about it now. We all have the rest of our lives to live, hun, and we owe it to ourselves to be happy. Now come on, finish your letter and let's go. Okay, Mom, I'll be down in a few minutes. I'm almost done. Waking up the next morning, Axel found Barbara sitting obediently in the chair next to his bed. When she saw that he had opened his eyes, she smiled. But before she could speak, Axel beat her to it. You know, you don't have to come to me all the time. I'm sure you have a life outside of this hospital. Forget about me. Go to work or do something else. Forget about you? She exclaimed. You saved my life. How can I forget about you? Very simple. Walk out the door and don't look back. Look, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude, but if you really want to thank me for saving your life, just leave me alone, please. She wondered. Why? I don't understand. Your heroism is all over the internet. You're a celebrity. I've already gotten 3 news channels calling me to tell me about it. They all want to interview you. That was the last thing he wanted. You didn't tell them where I am, did you? Well, yes, but I don't think the hospital will let them in unless you let them. I'm going to make sure of that right now, he said, and reached for the call button. Nurse, he addressed the woman in white who appeared in the doorway. I realize I may have reporters coming to see me, but don't let them in here. I don't want to see anyone. All right, Mr. Brolin. I'll let them know downstairs. When the nurse left, he looked at Barbara again. How did they figure you out? From the police report, I guess. Damn it, he hissed. Now they probably have my name too. Axel rolled his eyes toward the ceiling. I just want to be left alone. Is that too much to ask? I'm really sorry, Axel. I didn't realize. Oh, it's not your fault, Barbara. It's not your fault in any way. Don't worry about it. Are you being sarcastic now? No, not at all, honestly. I just don't want to be anyone's hero. I just want to get out of here and go somewhere where I'll be left alone, that's all. Well, if you want me to leave you alone, I will. But you'll always be my hero, Axel. You saved my life, and that's the kind of thing a man doesn't forget. She stood up with tears in her eyes, getting ready to leave. Axel felt sorry that he had been so cruel to her. Look, I'm really sorry. I've just had a bad week. I really wish you would stop wasting your time here. I know you have other things to do, but if you leave me your number, maybe I can call you every now and then to see how you're doing. He saw her smile for the first time. I'd love to, she replied. Taking a pen and paper from the nightstand next to the bed, she wrote down her name and number. Please don't lose it, Axel. Leaning over, she kissed him gently on the lips and repeated, I'll never forget you, Axel. You saved my life. You're a true hero. And with those words, she turned and left the room. As much as he wanted to be alone, the feeling of loneliness he felt when she walked out was palpable. For the first time since his whole world had crumbled, Axel was left with only his thoughts. Tears came to his eyes as he thought about the loss of his wife and daughter. Things would have been so much easier if they had just left him on the sidewalk. For Julie and Carrie, Sunday morning was the beginning of a new life. Julie spent the night making love to her new man. When she is officially divorced and they can go out in public, she will be the envy of women from Wisconsin to Indiana. Carrie woke up dreaming of a future with Chandler. Now that she was literally living in the same house with him, she had no doubt that he would learn to love her as much as she loved him. She couldn't wait to see the expressions on her friends' faces when they saw her riding to school with him on Monday morning. Her father was the furthest thing from her mind as she imagined all the questions they would ask. She was still daydreaming when she heard a knock on the door. Honey, are you awake yet? Yes, Mom. Get dressed and come down for breakfast. We still have to unpack and Jim wants to go horseback riding around the ranch. Okay, Mom, I'll be down in a few minutes. The ranch. Why did everyone call it a ranch? It was 12 acres of land in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. They probably call it a ranch because of the horses, she thought. In fact, Jim Freeman had dreamed of being a cowboy since he was a kid. When the opportunity came up to buy the house and all the land around it, he immediately accepted. He built a stable, bought a couple horses, and named the ranch J-Bar C Ranch. When he realized that horseback riding wasn't as easy as they show on TV, He hired an instructor for Chandler and for himself. He even bought a couple of Stetsons, although Chandler's Stetson remained in the closet. As soon as Julie started hinting that she wanted to divorce Axel and move in with him, Jim bought 2 more horses. Julie hadn't shown any interest in learning to ride. She was content to just sit on the beast while he walked around, but Chandler was an excellent horseman, so of course Carrie wanted to learn too. The first lesson was scheduled for the following Saturday. On Monday morning, Julie found out what it was like to be married to a TV news anchor when her alarm clock rang at 5 o'clock. She only groaned irritably. When she opened her eyes, Jim was already sitting on the edge of the bed. "Sorry, honey, but morning work pays better than 10 o'clock newscasts. Go back to bed now. I'll be back around 11:30. Julie grinned approvingly, rolled over onto her back, and went back to sleep. Chandler was used to getting ready for school on his own. He set his alarm 15 minutes earlier than usual so he could shower before he woke his future stepsister. By the time she showered, Chandler had already made breakfast. Julie came down to see them off just before they left, and then sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and began to contemplate her new morning routine. Jim was in a great mood when he walked into the studio. He greeted a few staff members on his way to the dressing room, picked out a light gray suit for the show, and went to makeup. He sat in a chair for about 10 minutes until Todd Kozlinski, the director, caught up with him. "Hey, Jim. Several cameramen said you're in good spirits. Did you have a good weekend?" "Yes, I did. It was busy, but very enjoyable. How was yours?" "Same as always, nothing new. Here's the script for the first newscast. We're going to start with a story about a guy who was recently stabbed to death. Tim has been at the hospital most of the weekend trying to interview him, but so far, nothing has come of it. Start with the first 3 lines and then duplicate the video. We have one footage of him getting stabbed and several others that show him being put on a gurney and taken away in an ambulance. Hopefully, by the time we get back to you, Tim will be ready to be interviewed from a distance, and if he can't, we'll have him say a few words from the hospital." Jim listened, looking over the text as he suddenly almost jumped out of his chair. "Axel Brolin. Has he been stabbed?" He almost shouted, shocking both Todd and the makeup artist. "Yeah, you know him." "Shit, Todd, I can't do the job. You're going to have to find someone else." "What do you mean you can't? For God's sake, this is our lead article. You have to do it." "Shit, shit, 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 shit. How the hell did he get stabbed? He didn't do it himself, did he?" "Are you kidding me? Where have you been hiding all weekend, in a cave? Hell, the YouTube video of him getting stabbed has already gotten almost 1 million views, not to mention Facebook, Instagram, and a dozen other sites. How do you know this guy?" Jim looked at the makeup artist. "Audrey, could you leave us in the room for a couple minutes?" She put down her makeup sponge and didn't look happy about being asked to leave, but did it anyway. Jim waited until she closed the door behind her. "I stole his wife and family." "What? What do you mean you stole?" It only took a split second before he had an epiphany. "Don't tell me you had fun with a married woman? Damn, Jim, you've got to be kidding me. Of all the women in this town, you couldn't find a single unmarried one? That's probably why you're in such a good mood." He snatched the script from Jim's hands. "Christ!" he shouted, and ran out of the room. Audrey poked her head through the door. "Should we continue or not?" "I wish I knew," he replied. A couple minutes later, he was called into the producer's office. "Go home, Jim. We'll announce that you're not feeling well." "How about a 10-hour commercial tonight?" "I don't know yet. Go home. We'll call you when we decide what to do. You know it's going to come out, right? With all the damn reporters we have in this town, somebody's going to find out. This Brolin guy is a national hero, and you know what all heroes have in common? Not a villain. Hopefully we can limit that nickname to the guys who stabbed him, but I'd hate to be in your shoes if the public finds out about your role in this case. Go home." Jim turned toward the door as his producer fired another parting shot. "And Jim, I really hope it was worth it." It was that last remark that drew Jim back into the dressing room. He looked at himself in the mirror. "You stupid bastard," he said aloud to whoever was looking at him. "He's right. You should have known better." He'd been in this business long enough to see careers ruined over less than what he'd encountered. Damn it, he thought to himself. It was too late to do anything about it now. The damage had already been done. All he could do was pray that none of his coworkers knew the whole story, but that was unlikely. especially since everyone was waiting for an interview with Brolin. He hoped it was just his imagination, but as he left the building, everyone seemed to frown at him. About the time he was walking to his private parking space, his son pulled into the school parking lot. As he walked through the main doors, he told Carrie he would meet her after school. She was standing at her locker when her friend Jenny saw her and rushed over to her. "Carrie, how's your dad?" Carrie looked at her friend in surprise, perplexed as to how she could possibly know what had happened. Ah, I don't know. I couldn't reach him." "How? Isn't he in the hospital?" "In the hospital? What do you mean? Why? Wasn't it your father who got stabbed? It sure looked like him." "Stabbed? Hey, Carrie," another friend called out. "How's your dad? Is he going to be okay?" Carrie stood there with her mouth open. Jenny spoke again, pulling out her cell phone. "Here, isn't that your dad?" she asked, showing Carrie the screen. "Oh my God," Carrie screamed. She bent down, pulled her phone out of her backpack in a panic, and called her mom while her friends watched. "Mom, Dad's been stabbed." What are you talking about?" "He got stabbed. They're talking about it on YouTube. That's why he's not answering my calls." "Okay, calm down. I'll make some calls and find out what's going on." "I want to go to him, Mom. I don't want to stay at school. I can't. I want to be with him." Okay, honey, go to the office and tell them what happened. Tell them I'll come get you. But I want to make some calls first, so I'm going to be a little late." "Okay, Mom. Just don't be late." "I won't be, honey. I'll stop by the office when I get there." Carrie cried, leaving her friends and heading for the office. Meanwhile, Julie had called Jim. He answered via his car's Bluetooth. "Yes?" "Jim, it's me. Have you heard anything about Axel being stabbed?" "Oh yeah, of course. I mean, he's kind of a national hero now." "Why didn't you say anything?" "I just heard about it. Why? What's going on?" "Carrie just found out about it at school. She's hysterical. I'm going to go pick her up. She wants to see him. Do you know what hospital he's in?" "No, but I can find out. I'll call you back in a few minutes." Jim disconnected the connection, then said into the receiver, "Call Tim McDaniels." "Jesus, Jim, I just talked to Todd. No, I haven't met him yet." "Tim, sorry to bother you, but I'm not calling about an interview. I just need to know what hospital he's in." "He's at Northwestern Hospital. But if you're thinking about a phone interview, good luck. Everyone is very mysterious about this guy. The nurses are acting weird, and I'm starting to doubt the guy survived." Jim's heart nearly dropped in his chest. "Oh shit, just what I need," he said aloud. Tim heard him over the phone. "Why?" "Never mind, thanks for the info, Tim," he said, disconnecting the call. "Shit, shit, shit," he yelled, hitting the steering wheel of his new Corvette. He took a deep breath before calling Julie back. "Hey, did you find out where he is? I'm just about to go pick up Carrie." "Yeah, he's at Northwest General, but..." "But what?" "Well, I was talking to a reporter who's trying to get an interview, and he says everyone's acting weird. You should ask Carrie to wait somewhere while you talk to someone." Do you think he might be dead?" "I don't know, hun, but Tim thinks it's entirely possible." "Oh my God. God, I hope he's not dead." Seeing the pain on his face will be Carrie's last memory of her father. I pray she doesn't have to live with that for the rest of her life. "Yeah, it's bad for all of us. I'm going home." "What? Why?" "What do you think? Your asshole husband is big news. He's the centerpiece of the morning show. When I told my principal I couldn't read it, he made me tell him the reason why. Television news is a cruel industry. Someone is going to find out about my role in this whole mess, and in this business, it's undesirable to become news. If this gets out, I could be fired." At this point, Julie sympathized with her daughter. "I can't worry about that right now. I'm worried about Carrie. I have to go," she snapped, unplugging herself. Now, in addition to worrying about her daughter, she was angry at her fiancé for his selfish attitude and for caring more about his job than Carrie. It was almost 9:30 when she pulled into the school parking lot. Before going inside, she pulled a tissue out of her purse and wiped her watery eyes. "Mom," Carrie called out as soon as she entered the school office. "Okay, okay, honey. It's going to be okay," she said as she hugged her daughter. Still hugging her daughter, Julie looked back at the counter and caught a glance from one of the secretaries. "Go ahead," the girl told her. "She's already checked out and we wish you all the best," she added. "I'm sure he'll be fine." Julie thanked her as she escorted Carrie to the exit. When they entered the main entrance of the hospital, Julie told Carrie to sit down and wait for her until she spoke to the woman behind the counter. Carrie didn't like it, but she obeyed her mom. Julie was stunned when she approached the hospital receptionist. "Excuse me, I'm Julie Brolin, Axel Brolin's wife. Could you please give me an update on his condition?" She didn't like the concerned look on her face. "Mrs. Brolin, the doctor will want to talk to you. Do you see those little rooms down the hallway over there?" She indicated the direction with a nod of her head. "Please take a seat in room number 2, and I'll let the doctor know you're waiting." "Okay, but at least tell me if he's alive or dead." "Mrs. Brolin, I understand your concern, but you need to talk to the doctor." Julie threw her a reproachful look and sighed. "Okay, look. That's our daughter sitting over there. If she says she wants to be there with me, tell her she's underage or something. If her father is dead, I don't want her finding out from some doctor." "I understand, Mrs. Brolin. The doctor will want to talk to you alone anyway," she confirmed. Carrie jumped up as soon as she saw her mother walking in her direction. "Is he all right?" "The woman I talked to doesn't know anything, honey. I have to go to that little room over there. Your father's doctor will let me know how he's feeling. I'm sorry, you're too young to be in there with me, but I'll be back as soon as I talk to the doctor." Carrie didn't like that, but she went back and sat down, keeping her eyes on her mother. Julie didn't have to wait long. A middle-aged man with graying temples and a white coat came in and closed the door behind him. Julie didn't wait for him to sit down. "How's he doing, doctor?" She saw him frown and immediately thought the worst. "I was hoping you could tell me," he replied. Julie frowned. "What are you talking about? How the hell am I supposed to know?" "You're his doctor, aren't you?" "He escaped from here last night. Don't ask me how, because your guess is as good as mine. We were going to discharge him today anyway, but we have medicine we were going to give him for pain and to relieve his toilet functions." "How could you let him go like that?" "This is a hospital, Mrs. Brolin, not a prison. He was passed out and we took the monitors off him. He somehow got around the lock on the closet, got dressed, and slipped past the nurses. I was hoping he'd gone home. My daughter and I hadn't been home in days. We were out of town. My daughter tried to call him several times, but he didn't answer. And I came here when I found out what happened." "He wasn't answering his cell phone because it was broken during the attack?" "Oh, I see. I can explain that to my daughter. She thinks he just doesn't want to talk to her. You said he's out of the woods, so that means he's going to be okay, right?" "Well, not really. He's had stitches outside and inside. Too much activity can cause the stitches to tear, especially if he tries to lift something. He needs to take it easy for at least 2 to 3 weeks. If he ruptures his internal wounds, he could bleed to death. Here's the packet of instructions we were going to give him on release. I don't have to, but I'm also giving you his medication. The instructions are in the packet. If you find him at home or see him, please give him these instructions. He must follow the procedure and call me if you find him. I will want to see him immediately to check his wounds. Here's my card." "Will do, doctor." She took his card, staring into space and contemplating what to say to her daughter. "There's one more thing, Mrs. Brolin. He told me that you and your daughter left him for another man before he was stabbed. Axel is very bad mentally. After the operation, he cursed me for saving his life. He told me that when he thought he was going to die, he was grateful to the 2 men who stabbed him. He needs to see a mental health professional as soon as possible. Also in the packet is the number for the Crisis Prevention Center and the suicide hotline. Good luck, Mrs. Brolin." As he turned his back on her and walked away, Julie began to realize the difference between a life partner and a lover. From her previous conversation with Jim, she didn't feel she could count on him, much less Axel. He would never abandon her in her time of need. Carrie jumped up and rushed to her mother as soon as she came out of the small room. "What's going on, Mom? Is he okay? Can we see him?" "He's not here, honey. He was discharged this morning," she lied. "He must have gone home. We're just on our way there, and by the way, the reason he's not answering his cell phone has nothing to do with you. It was broken during the attack." Carrie felt visibly relieved and relaxed even more when her mother informed her that he had been released from the hospital. She was beginning to believe that everything was going to be okay when Julie pulled up in front of the house and asked her to wait in the car. "What aren't you telling me, Mom?" "Nothing, honey. I just don't know what kind of reception we're going to get. Please stay here, and I'll call you as soon as I know how he's doing." Carrie was beyond furious, but stayed in the car while her mother went into the house. Julie was relieved to find the front door unlocked. He never left the house without closing the door behind him. Axel, she called upstairs. Are you in there? There was no reply. Shit, she muttered. She peeked out from around the corner and peered into the kitchen. She saw that the coffee pot was half full. She knew it had been empty when they left. Of course, he could have come home right after they left and cooked it. She walked over to the coffee pot and smiled. It wasn't hot, but still a little warm, which gave her hope. Maybe he's sleeping upstairs, she thought. Julie almost jogged up the stairs, expecting to find him lying on their double bed, but he wasn't there, just a couple of crumpled sheets, evidence that he had at least briefly laid down. She walked into the master bathroom. There was a towel hanging over the shower door that hadn't been there before. She touched it with her hand. It was still a little damp. The only thing she noticed was that there was no charger for his razor on the counter. She opened the top drawer and saw that the razor was missing too. She went back to the bedroom and checked the closet. Some of his everyday items were missing. She checked the closet again and found more items missing, as well as personal items of sentimental value. Oh, wow. She checked the jewelry box and saw that her father's and mother's watches were also missing. They weren't very valuable, but they held fond memories for him. When his parents died, he took the two watches and half of the money from the sale of the house. The rest went to his illegitimate older brother. Could he have gone to his brother, she thought? No, they hadn't spoken in years. It would probably be the last place he would go. Carrie was getting worried. She had to find out what was going on. The first thing she did was check the kitchen table. Her letter was still lying there unopened. Mom, where are you? Where's Daddy? I'm here, honey, in the bedroom. Carrie found her mother sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Daddy's jewelry box in her lap. Where's Daddy? He hasn't seen my letter yet. Julie knew from the coffee pot that he was in the kitchen. She couldn't imagine he hadn't seen the envelope. I don't know, honey, he was here, but he must have left again. If I know your father, he's gone somewhere to be alone. Where might he have gone? I have no idea, Carrie. Your guesses are as good as mine. Just then a thought struck her. Honey, run and get my purse. I need to make a phone call. Without thinking, Carrie ran to the car and quickly returned. No. Julie thanked her daughter while digging through her cell phone. I'll call Mr. Gosnell, his supervisor. He'll find out where your father went. When she connected to the plant's main number, she had to listen to the receptionist brag about what a wonderful man Axel was before she was connected. Roy, this is Julie Brolin. Julie, how's Axel doing? I tried to call him, but I read in the paper that his phone was broken in a fight, and I don't have your number. How is he doing? So you haven't spoken to him at all since it happened? No, why? What's the matter? Is he going to be okay? I think so, she answered. You see, she told Axel's boss the same bunch of lies she told everyone else. She said that she and Carrie were out of town, that he was released from the hospital this morning, that the doctor said he'd be fine. Roy, he'll probably call you before I do. If so, please let me know where he is, okay? That sounded a little strange. Why would Axel call him before he called his wife? Julie, is everything okay? We had a little fight before I left. He's probably still mad at me, that's all. He wasn't going to dig deeper, but he knew Axel, and there was no way the man would let a family argument stop him from calling his wife and child after what he'd been through. Something wasn't right. I'll call you if I hear from him, I promise, he replied. Hanging up the phone, Julie told her daughter that Axel hadn't been in touch from work either. Let's go back to the ranch, honey. Back to the ranch? What if he comes back? We have to stay here. Honey, he's missing clothes and other things. I'm sure he's found a nice, quiet place to recover a little. He probably won't be back for another couple weeks. We'll check on him periodically, but right now we can't do more than what we've already done. The ranch is our home. This is where we belong. Axel was surprised at how easily he had managed to slip out of the hospital. Using the butter knife he had hidden during dinner, he had picked the flimsy lock on the closet door with incredible ease. He took the clothes into the bathroom to wash himself. Fortunately, he had been wearing dark clothes on the day of the attack, so the bloodstains were not as visible. Once dressed, he simply and casually walked outside. In the dimly lit hallway, he only saw two nurses who smiled as he passed by. Judging from his clothes, they assumed he was an orderly. After walking about half a mile down the road, he realized how stupid his escape had been. He was in a lot of pain, and it was still 7 or 8 miles to home. About the time he realized the chances of getting home were nil. A passing car slowed down and stopped. By then, Axel was holding his stomach and walking bent over. A young man stepped out of the car on the driver's side. "Mister, do you need any help?" After all he had been through, Axel wasn't sure if the young man's intentions were altruistic or sinister, but he was in no condition to be vigilant. I, I could use a ride, he muttered through the pain. The young man rushed over to him and helped support him as they walked slowly to the car. When they both got into the car, the young man asked where he wanted to go. Axel gave him the address and they pulled into the driveway. "My name is Danny," the young man said. "Are you going to be okay? The hospital is the other way. I can turn around and take you." "No, no, I'll be fine. I just need to lie down and rest for a while." When they reached his house, Danny helped him up the stairs. Axel, limping, went to the desk drawer where he kept cash for emergencies and offered the young man $20, but he declined. "Are you sure you'll be all right?" he asked. "I really think you need to go to the hospital." "No, I'll be fine," he repeated. "But you saved me, thank you." Once Danny reluctantly left, Axel sank down on the bed, remaining in his clothes. A few minutes later, he lost consciousness. When he opened his eyes, it was already 8 o'clock and a new day was just beginning. His stomach still ached, but not as much as before. He took his time, but was determined to take a nice, relaxing, warm shower, after which he felt almost like a new person, at least physically. He brewed himself some coffee and sat down at the kitchen table to take stock of the rest of his life. There was nothing special about it. He hated his job. The only reason he worked there was for the money, and it paid well. He could provide his wife and daughter with a good life. He glanced back at the breakfast counter and looked into the living room. Did he want to stay in this house? No, every corner of every room held too many memories and staying here would be sheer torture. Everything he had ever loved was now gone. There was absolutely nothing that could keep him here. He saw the envelope on the table. It was addressed to him in his daughter's handwriting. He didn't need to open it. He could already guess what it said. She was sorry. She still loved him. Empty words. If they were true, she wouldn't have left him. So what now? He asked himself. He wondered if his car was in the parking lot of that bar. He hailed a cab and was pleasantly surprised to see that she was still there. He stopped by the bank on the way home and had to wade through a stream of enthusiastic customers and employees who were all talking the same crap about what a hero he was. By the time he got home, he had almost $16,000, a full tank of gas, and as far as he could tell, no past or future. There were work suits hanging in his closet, clothes that epitomized his former life, a life that had betrayed him, a life he no longer aspired to. He had always heard, "Man is not an island," but he was going to prove them wrong. He took with him only his everyday clothes and his mom and dad's wristwatches. He hadn't shed a single tear, but that all changed when he got ready to leave for the last time. He knew he shouldn't do it, but he couldn't leave without going through the whole house. He stopped at the door of Carrie's room and looked inside. He remembered all the times he had carried her to bed, put her to sleep, and read her stories. And then tears came to his eyes. The harder he cried, the more he was drawn to the memories. He went out into the backyard, to the terrace where the three of them took turns feeding the chipmunks. He looked up at the big oak tree where he'd built a swing for Carrie when she was only 5 years old. A few years ago, he was going to tear them down, but she wouldn't let him. He could hear her voice in his head. "No, Daddy, I still swing on them sometimes when I need to think about something important." The tears turned to sobs, and he had to sit down on one of the patio chairs Julie had talked him into buying. After crying, Axel took a deep breath to calm himself and went back inside. He picked up his suitcase and walked out the front door. After driving half a block down the street, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw his wife's car pulling up in their driveway. He pressed the gas pedal a little harder and drove on. Jim was sitting at the dining room table with an empty glass with no melting ice cubes or half a bottle of whiskey in it when Carrie and her mother walked into the room. "Jim, it's only noon." "So it's 5 o'clock somewhere in the world," he replied. Julie turned to Carrie. "Are you hungry, dear?" "Not really, Mom. I think I'll go lie down for a while." Jim waited for Carrie to leave. "Have you seen those videos? There's only one where he's actually stabbed, but there are several where they put him on a stretcher and carry him away. You can clearly see his face in some of them, he said, unfolding the laptop so she could see. The first clip started just as Axel collided with the jaw of the first attacker. It looked like the second guy had punched him in the side before he could turn around, but Julie managed to see the knife as the attacker pulled it back out. She gasped and covered her mouth with her hand as the first guy stabbed him in the stomach. Oh God, I hope Carrie didn't see that. She said she watched the video. I hope that wasn't it. Well, if she hasn't seen it yet, I'm sure she will. A lot of them have gone viral. They're all over the net. So you've seen it? When will he be discharged from the hospital? He's already been discharged. He left last night and no one knew about it. The doctor gave me some medicine for him. I thought he would be at the house, but he wasn't there. Some of his clothes are gone too. I have no idea where he could have gone. Okay, maybe if he disappears, people will forget about him. Jim, that's terrible. What about Carrie? She still loves him, you know that. Honey, my job depends on liking me in front of the camera. If this gets out, I could lose not only my job, but my career. I could end up on some local station in Podunk Junction. Come on, you know that's not going to happen. For heaven's sake, you're the second most viewed anchor in Chicago. Have you ever heard the expression fame is fleeting? Believe me when I tell you it's true. At that moment, his cell phone rang. He looked at the display. It's Bob from the station. I hope it's good news. He pressed the connect button. Julie could only hear his part of the conversation. Hi, Bob. How are you doing? Yeah, I know. Julie just got back from the hospital. No, she went by the house, but he wasn't there. She said some of his clothes were missing. He must have gone away for a while. She has no idea. Bob, if his wife doesn't know where he is, how the hell am I supposed to know? And for how long? Shit. Okay, stay in touch. Let me know when things start to quiet down. Yeah, okay, bye. He looked at Julie, who was perplexed as to what was going on. The rumors have reached us. Tim, our reporter who was at the hospital, was finally able to tell us about your husband's daring escape, he informed her sarcastically. Okay, what does that mean to you? Jim replied with a concerned look on his face. It means they want me to take a vacation until things calm down, he said. Well, that's not so bad, is it? Maybe we can go somewhere, take a vacation. It'll distract Carrie for a while. The school doesn't seem to mind. I don't think they'd mind if she took a week off. What about Chandler? What's he going to do while we're gone? His grades are good enough to take a week of vacation. We're not taking a vacation, he replied with a note of anger. If the station calls, I should be ready to go there immediately. I just think that would be… The answer is no, he replied with even more anger. Besides, Carrie has her first writing lesson this Saturday. She'll love it, and I'm sure it will take her mind off her worries for a while. Julie didn't like the way she was being spoken to, but there was nothing she could do about it, so she left it at that. As soon as word got out that Axel had escaped from the hospital in the middle of the night, every reporter within a 100-mile radius of Chicago realized it wasn't just a stabbing story. Why did he run off like that? Was it a setup? Maybe the mob? Why he disappeared? Was he wanted by the law? Who he was running from? Why they couldn't find his wife? Why she wasn't waiting for him at the house? Was she with him, or was she the one who made the contract with him? A good mystery is like a treat for a reporter. They had been watching his house, but all to no avail. A few investigative reporters started investigating, but ran into a brick wall. The first lead was found by a blogger playing the long game. He went to the bar where it all started and found the bartender, who was there when it all happened. Excuse me, I understand you were here when that guy got stabbed last week, he said. Yes, he was here for a good couple hours. I'm ashamed. I was the one who told him to leave. He'd already had 4 beers. According to the rules, I wasn't supposed to let him go, but he seemed to be okay driving. If I'd let him stay for one more, he wouldn't have gotten stabbed. Yeah, but don't forget he saved that woman, so you may have saved a life. The bartender smiled. Yeah, I guess it's possible. The blogger pulled a business card out of his wallet and held it out to him. My name is Walter Frey. I'm a reporter. The bartender shook his hand. I'm Jack. I suppose you heard the guy disappeared. Yeah, though it doesn't really surprise me. Why do you say that? He was drowning his sorrow that day. I decided to try to cheer him up and asked him why he was so depressed. It took me a while to get him talking, but eventually, he told me that his wife and daughter had run off with another man. It was exactly the story he had hoped for, and it explained a lot. How old is his daughter? He didn't say, but it sounds like she's probably a teenager. Damn, Jack, that's really rude. Yeah, I knew right away that his daughter was the apple of his eye. Damn, that's gotta hurt. Did he say who the other guy was? No, I don't think he really knew. He mentioned that the guy owned a ranch somewhere nearby. A ranch? Kind of like a cowboy ranch. Yippee-ki-yay and all that? I have no idea, I guess, but people who have horses here usually say they have a stable, not a ranch. Ranch is more of a Western term, so maybe this guy's from somewhere out west. Sounds like an option, the reporter replied. Did he say anything about what kind of relationship he had with his wife before she ran away? No, not really. It seemed to me that the guy was completely dumbfounded. He said he came home from work and saw his wife and daughter packing. When he asked what was the matter, the wife said she had fallen in love with another man, and she and her daughter were going to leave to go to his ranch. That's about it. I'm going to look into that. I appreciate your help. Do me a favor, if you remember anything else, give me a call. The number is on the card. I will, Jack replied. It wasn't much, but he got some insight into the situation. It looked like Axel just wanted to get away, and he couldn't blame him, especially if he was completely blindsided like the bartender had said. As soon as he got back to his office, Walter started looking for ranches in the Chicago area and was surprised to find a website called Top 10 Ranches in Chicago. But when he clicked on each one individually, they all called themselves either horse farms or stables, and only one called itself a ranch. Well, he thought, this is as good a place as any to start. After driving around the neighborhood for about 45 minutes, he found that an elderly couple and their 30-year-old daughter owned the place. He asked a few questions, but immediately realized he was wasting his time. Back to the drawing board, he said to himself as he got in his car and headed back home. All week, the atmosphere at JBCS Ranch had been gloomy. Jim was worried about his job, Julie was worried about Carrie was worried about her father, and Chandler was furious about the whole situation and wished his father had never met Julie. Carrie felt even worse when her riding instructor showed up on Saturday morning. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail that stuck out from under a black Stetson. A Western-style hat provided shade but couldn't hide the sparkle of her blue eyes. Her boyish-style plaid shirt stuck out the front and was tucked into the narrow waist of her tight-fitting Levi's. She was about as cute as a person could ever be, and certainly cute enough to get Chandler's attention. He hopped off the porch and approached her as soon as she got out of the car. Hi, can I help you? Hi, I'm Cheyenne Bennett. I'm here to give writing lessons. She pulled a piece of paper out of her top shirt pocket and unfolded it. Carrie Brolin, is that you? No, I'm Chandler, he said, holding out his hand. An older woman taught my dad and me how to write a few years ago. Yeah, that was my mom. She wasn't feeling well this morning, so I'm afraid you're staying with me today. Damn, he said, widening his already big grin. I could use a refresher course. She smiled, but decided to ignore the remark. So where do I find Carrie? She's in the house. I'll get her. Carrie watched from the window and was seething with jealousy. Chandler stood at the foot of the stairs and called her into the room. Carrie, your writing instructor is here. I'll be right down, she replied. Chandler hurried back outside. She'll be out in a couple minutes. I've saddled her horse and another. Let me lead them out after you. He walked quickly to the stables and led out 2 fine quarter horses by the reins. This is Carrie's horse, Destiny, and this one is her mom's. Daddy gave them both horses and said they could give them names, but Julie calls hers just Horse, he said with a laugh. She doesn't want to learn to ride? Cheyenne asked. Ask Cheyenne. 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 No, she doesn't like that at all. If Horse starts walking fast, she panics. At that moment, Carrie appeared outside and walked over to them. Here's Carrie, he said. Carrie, this is Cheyenne. She's going to teach you how to ride. Carrie greeted him without enthusiasm, but Cheyenne wrote it off as nervousness. She checked the saddles and made sure everything was buckled properly, then waited for Carrie to get on the horse. They rode slowly, Cheyenne watching Carrie's posture and telling her several times to keep her pelvis straight. Carrie had to admit that after the hour-long lesson, she was starting to feel more confident in the saddle. Of course, Chandler was looking forward to their return. So, how did it go? He turned to Cheyenne, not Carrie. It went well. She's a good student. Soon she'll be galloping like Annie Oakley, she replied with a smile. I thought Annie Oakley was a sharpshooter, Chandler replied with a wide grin. She was, but she was shooting at all those flying saucers in the air while on horseback. Carrie took off her bridle and handed it to Chandler. She looked at Cheyenne and thanked her for the lesson, then went back into the house. Chandler inquired how she was doing. Did she really make it? Yeah, she made it through. Really, I think she got a little pissed off about something. Did she want to take the lessons herself or was she talked into it? No, she asked to take the lessons herself. Cheyenne got off her horse. Well, maybe she's just having a bad day. I'll be back next Saturday if you don't cancel the lessons. I don't think that's possible. Why don't you have a cup of coffee with me sometime? She looked at him. He was cute, but aren't you in school yet? I'm graduating this year, he replied. Don't you think I'm a little old for you? No, not at all. What are you, all of 20? 21? So you're 3 years older. Great. You know what they say. Age is just a number. Come on, what do you say? He looked more mature than most 18-year-olds. She smiled. When? How about tomorrow? You know the corner coffee shop on York Road. She hesitated only a moment. Okay, 2 o'clock? It's a date, he replied, holding out his hand. She shook his hand. I'll see you then. Cheyenne got back in the car and waved goodbye to him as she drove away. Damn it, Chandler muttered to himself. Carrie watched all of this from her bedroom window. She had no idea what they were talking about, but she didn't like that Chandler asked the pretty teacher how it went instead of asking her. Obviously, he didn't know about her plans for the two of them. She had to let him know somehow that they were meant to be together. But it had to be done subtly. She didn't want to scare him away. That night, lying in bed, Carrie thought long and hard about how to let Chandler know that he played an important role in her plans for her life. There was a small lake in the backyard of the house. What could be more romantic than a picnic? Yes, she and Chandler could go to the lake and have a picnic. Perfect, she thought. With thoughts of her and Chandler making out by the lake, Carrie fell asleep, glowing with excitement. On Sunday, Carrie waited until Chandler was alone. Guess what I did? I give up. What did you do? Oh, you're no fun, she scoffed. I made us a picnic basket. I thought I could show you what I learned yesterday while we go to the lake and have a picnic. Sorry, Carrie, I have a date. A date? With who? He was a little taken aback by her seemingly angry answer. With Cheyenne, he replied kindly. Cheyenne? Jesus, Chandler. She must be in her early 20s. So what? She seems nice and I want to get to know her better. What's it to you? She may have been young and inexperienced, but she knew now wasn't the time to tell him how she felt. She'd wait for the right opportunity, but for now she needed to keep her predators at bay, Cheyenne included. We're going to be living under the same roof, Chandler, and don't you think it would be nice if we got to know each other better? It didn't sound unreasonable, but he wasn't about to blow off the date. We have plenty of time to get to know each other, Carrie. Like you said, we live under the same roof. I drive you to and from school every day. We'll be spending a lot of time together, so relax. She tried to think of something to say, but he didn't give her a chance. I'm going to go change. I'll see you later. With those words, he just left her standing there. She was beyond furious, but knew she had to stay calm. A short time later, she heard Chandler tell her father that he was leaving early because he wanted to stop by the flower store to buy Cheyenne a rose. She watched him leave from her upstairs bedroom window, and then she lay down and cried. Axel stood looking out at the most incredible landscape he had ever seen. As far as the eye could see, giant red rocks stretched up into the clouds. He had no idea where he was. It seemed to be somewhere in Utah. There were signs on the road he was on saying it was historic, but he didn't pay much attention to that. In fact, he'd been driving for a week now and hadn't paid any attention to it. He remembered crossing the Mississippi for the first time in his life, and he knew he'd driven through several states, but which ones and where they were, who knew? The pain in his stomach was getting less and less each day. He could finally get in and out of the car without wrinkling his nose. In another couple weeks, he'd be as good as new, physically anyway. The psychological pain he knew would never go away. His wife and child were everything to him. He had dreamed all his life of becoming a watercolor artist to provide financial security for his family. From the time he was old enough to pick up a paintbrush, he knew what he wanted to do with his life. His high school art teachers noticed his talent right away and helped him win a scholarship to the Art Institute of Chicago, one of the most prestigious art schools in the country. And then he met Julie and fell head over heels in love. He knew it would take years of hard work and study to become a successful artist. How would he be able to support his wife and eventually his family? His father worked at the Ford plant and made a good living. They weren't rich, but he grew up in a nice house with 2 cars in the garage. He always had good clothes and plenty of food. And then Axel's plans changed. He asked his father for help and got a job as a welder at the same factory where his father worked. They had an apprenticeship program and eventually he started earning enough to ask Julie to marry him. He didn't give up the idea of becoming a watercolorist, but decided it would take longer. He decided that he would work at Ford during the day and paint in the evenings and on weekends. Unfortunately, he didn't factor in the time it would take to get married. There was always somewhere to go and something to do. With the arrival of Carrie, things changed for the better. His dreams had faded further and further into the background until they disappeared altogether, but he never complained or regretted it. He hadn't picked up a paintbrush in years, but the painting in front of him was inspiring. Leaning back in his car seat, he watched in awe as the sun slowly dipped behind the mountains. As much as he enjoyed the serenity, Axel didn't want to drive down this winding road with steep cliffs after dark, so he continued on his way, hoping to find a motel soon. By the time he reached the end of the road, it was almost completely dark. What to do now, he thought. He had 2 ways to go, left or right. To the right was only darkness, but there were lights on the other side. He drove slowly down Main Street, as the sign said, looking for a motel. Damn, he muttered. It seemed like he'd driven through the whole damn place. He'd seen quite a few small towns in his travels, but this one was top-notch. He made a 3-point turn and drove back. This time he turned right at the first opportunity and came across the Tory Motel. He prayed it had a spare room because he didn't feel at all like driving through the mountain roads at night. He got worried when he didn't see anyone behind the counter. He rang the bell labeled "Call Me" and was pleased to see a young woman appear from the back room. "Yes, sir? I hope you have a spare room for this night?" "Yes, sir, we have several. Is it just for you?" "Just for me," he replied with relief. "We have 2 rooms with double beds for $159, 1 room with a double bed for $39, and a smaller room with a single bed for $75. The smaller room has the best view of the mountains," she added with a smile. "Sounds good to me. Would cash be okay?" "Sure." "Is there a restaurant in the motel?" "No, sir. We have a continental breakfast in the mornings, but no restaurant. What do you prefer? We have everything from fine dining restaurants to ma-and-pa diners." Axel chuckled to himself. From what he could see, the town didn't look big enough for a coffee shop. "Nothing fancy," he replied. "A hamburger, fries, and a cup of decent coffee will do just fine. Slackers, just go out the way you came from and turn right onto Main Street. You won't miss it." He thanked her as she pointed in the direction to his room. It turned out to be just as the girl had described. Small. It was too dark to get a good look at the mountains. He took a quick shower and then headed to Main Street to get some dinner. He had to admit that it was one of the best burgers he'd ever had. When he got back to his room, it started all over again. A deep depression that consumed his soul. It started every night around the same time and was like a big, heavy blanket that was impossible to get out of. He knew from experience that suicidal thoughts would soon enter his head. They frightened him. He didn't want to die, but at the same time, he knew it would give him peace. Was it worth living despite the pain and emptiness or not? It was a question he had asked himself 1,000 times since leaving Chicago. Usually, he just lay down and let the spell consume him until sleep brought relief, but this time he was determined to rid himself of the curse. He saw a cheap ballpoint pen with a motel logo on the table, stationery paper lying next to it. He sat down, unfolded the paper horizontally, and visualized the beautiful, rugged terrain he had been looking at earlier. Before he realized it, the pen was in his hand, and he began to make a series of quick strokes. He started with the horizon line and then began working on the composition, strategically placing peaks, valleys, and plateaus to direct the viewer's eye to a point of interest. Once the basic sketch was done, he determined the direction of the sun and shaded the shadows accordingly. He then worked through the overall tonal range, emphasizing highlights, midtones, and deep shadows. A small smile appeared on his face, perhaps the first in a long time. Not bad, he thought, holding the ink sketch in his hands. For the first time in 10 years, he regretted not having a watercolor. When he went to bed, the desire to paint again was replaced by the sense of doom he usually felt before going to sleep. The next morning, he ate a couple of sweet rolls and drank coffee before heading to the front desk. The cute girl who had greeted him the day before was now replaced by a middle-aged man. "Hello, I'm staying in your little room." "Yes, Mr. Brolin. Did you sleep well?" The friendly courtesy caught him off guard. "Yes, thank you. I was wondering if I could stay another day or two." "Sure, but since you're paying cash, I'd ask that you pay each day in advance." "No problem," he replied, pulling 100 out of his wallet. "Do you happen to have an art store in town?" "Oh, well, there's a store in town called Susie's Craft. They might have some art supplies. I know she sells picture frames and stuff like that." "I'll check it out, thanks." After getting his instructions, Axel walked back into town and went into the store. They only had a couple of kids' kits out of paints, but they had charcoal pencils and sketch pads. When he returned to his room, the maid was just starting to sort out his bed. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I thought you had already checked out." "No, I'm going to stay another day or two, but don't let me stop you. Go and do whatever you need to do." She finished making the bed and was about to head to the bathroom when she saw the ink drawing from the previous night. "Oh, wow, did you do that?" He smiled at her enthusiasm. "Yes, I was inspired by the scenery here. It's beautiful. You're really good. Are you famous?" He grinned. No, I used to think I'd be one someday, but it was just a pipe dream." "Oh, sir, don't overestimate yourself. We have artists coming through all the time, and you're as good as any of them." I, I don't think I can take it," she asked hesitantly. "Yes, of course, take it." "Thank you," she hesitated again. "Would you mind signing this for me?" He took the pen and signed. "Thanks again. I'm going to frame it and hang it on the wall in my house. Maybe someday I'll be able to tell people I have the original." She paused to look at the inscription. An Axel Brolin original. Finished cleaning up, she slid the curtains on the double patio doors, revealing the mountain scenery, and left with the sketch. Axel sat on the bed, turning to face the open landscape, and began sketching. The charcoal allowed him to be more creative with his shading. Soon he had another sketch, which he plucked from the clipboard and immediately began another. Before he knew it, there was a whole pile of charcoal sketches on the bed. He studied each one, picking out what he didn't like about some and what he liked about others. "Damn," he whined aloud, "I need paints." Anyway, the time was nearing lunchtime. On his way to Slackers, he looked around the table. The same guy was still there. "Hey again." "Mr. Brolin, what can I do for you?" "Do you happen to know where the nearest art store is? I really need to buy some watercolors. Even a basic set wouldn't hurt." "I'm sorry, but I honestly don't know. Most of the towns around here are small. I know a few artists live in the area, but I have no idea where they get their materials. Maybe Amazon has what you're looking for?" "Amazon?" He didn't even think about them. "I'm not sure, maybe. Do they deliver here?" "Well, not exactly. Their drivers don't like driving on winding roads, especially at night. But they have a point in Venice. It's about an hour away. You can arrange to pick him up there. That's what most of us do. Did you come by the 24th or 12th route?" "Ah, the 12th. Isn't it?" "Yes, it can be scary for those who aren't used to driving in the mountains. Venice is a straight 24th. It's still a bit of a loop, but not as scary as the 12th. "Do you have Wi-Fi here?" "Of course we do. We got it about 5 years ago. They finally installed it because of the influx of tourists." "Okay, I'm on my way to lunch at Slackers, but I'll check out Amazon when I get back, thanks." Amazon really did have everything he was looking for. He was also pleasantly surprised to see that his favorite watercolor paper from 10 years ago was still available. The prices, on the other hand, didn't make him very happy. He couldn't believe how expensive everything was. He wasn't sure how long his urge to paint would last, So he ordered only what he thought would be a good start. 2 days later, he felt like a kid in a candy store as he drove back from Venice, Utah with a backseat full of drawing supplies. Back in his room, Axel wasted no time. He cut the watercolor paper into fours, then wet one of the stretchy sheets and stapled it to the backing paper to let it dry. Then he began laying out his new palette. Earth tones on one side, cool colors on the other. He squeezed a small amount of paint into each well. When he added water to Scarlet Lake, his favorite red pigment, it reminded him of lying on the sidewalk and watching his blood mix with the rainwater running down the drain. He had to stop for a moment. One thought brought it all back as if it had happened yesterday. He took a deep breath and looked through the double glass doors at the red mountains. Not so long ago it seemed to him that life was over and he was ready to meet his maker, but now, speaking as an independent reporter and blogger, Walter Frey didn't give up easily. After talking to the bartender, he realized that Axel Brolin's stabbing was just the tip of the iceberg. It was a real human story that could be told, but so far he was running into brick walls. No one knew where Axel was or where to look for his wife and daughter. For the past 3 weeks, he had used every investigative method he knew, including just driving around and talking to everyone who had horses. Returning from yet another dead end, he noticed a place he hadn't been to yet. The sign read, Bennett's Boarding Stables and Riding Academy. As he approached, he saw a middle-aged woman walking from the house to the stables. "Excuse me," he called out as he got out of the car. "Do you work here?" She giggled. "Young man, you have no idea. What can I do for you?" He introduced himself and gave her a business card, then told her who he was looking for. "Brolin, that name sounds familiar to me. My daughter is giving riding lessons to a girl. I believe her name is Brolin. She's over there in the horse room, if you'd like to ask her." He walked across the hard dirt to a small building and knocked. A young female voice was heard from within, inviting him in. He introduced himself again and told her who he was looking for. Cheyenne looked at his business card with more skepticism than her mother. "Why are you looking for them?" she asked. She asked. She asked. "If she's who I think she is, she's the daughter of that guy who was stabbed to death a few weeks ago." "What guy?" "The one on the internet. The guy who saved a woman from being kidnapped." "Oh, I know who you're talking about. You think the girl I'm teaching to skate is his daughter?" "Well, I'm not sure until I get a chance to talk to them. There are all sorts of rumors about them, and I'd like to get their side of the story." Cheyenne thought for a moment. "I don't know who you are. Anyone can print cards. I'll give them to Mrs. Brolin. If she wants to talk to you, she can call you. That's the best I can do." It wasn't at all what he had hoped for, but he wasn't going to try to pressure the pretty young lady. "Okay, please tell her it's very important that she call me back." Walking away, he was disappointed. If Brolin's wife and daughter had left him for another man, there was no way they were going to call him and admit it. Chandler was waiting out front when Cheyenne drove up to him the following Saturday. She had planned to ask him about it, but changed her mind at the last minute. She really liked him, but she had done a little research and the whole Brolin situation seemed a little confusing. If the speculation about the guy's wife and daughter was true, she wondered what part Chandler played in it. She waited until she and Carrie had gotten far enough away from the house and started asking around. "So, Carrie, how long are you here for?" Carrie looked at her a little strange. "Visiting? Who said we were visiting? We live here." "Oh, I'm sorry, I just assumed that since you and your mother have different last names, you came to visit Chandler and his father." "What about your father? Does he live here too?" "No, my mom divorced him. We moved here about 3 weeks ago. She and Jim are getting married soon." Getting married? Cheyenne wasn't stupid or naive. It was obvious that her student's mother and Jim Freeman were lovers, and likely having an affair behind Mr. Brolin's back. "I'm sorry about your father. Do you see him often?" "No, he's sort of disappeared. Mom says he's probably found a secluded place to come to terms with what's going on. We've checked the house a couple times, but so far he hasn't come back. He got into a fight recently and his phone broke, so I haven't been able to call him either." "Damn, that's hard, but I'm sure he loves you." "Yeah, I love him too. I'd really like to talk to him." Cheyenne understood and was about to change the tone of the conversation. Did Chandler know his father was having an affair with a married woman? The question infuriated Carrie, but she saw it as an opportunity. Of course, and by the way, that's another point. Chandler and I are getting married too, so if you have any ideas about you and him, forget it. You're too old for him anyway. The remark was such a shock that Cheyenne nearly flew out of the saddle. You and Chandler are getting married? This was news to her. Other than coffee, they'd had dinner together only a few nights ago and he hadn't said a word. And that was when she was starting to like him. When is this supposed to happen? Well, not soon yet. Sometime after Mom and Jim's wedding. But he's mine, so don't make anything up, okay? Does Chandler know it's yours? Of course. Now, Cheyenne interrupted the lesson, and they drove to the house in silence. Chandler heard them pull up and came out to greet them. You're back early. Is everything okay? Fine, Cheyenne replied curtly, getting off her horse. You need to find another instructor for Carrie. I can't do this anymore. Chandler's eyes widened in shock. What? 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 What happened? Cheyenne was already getting into the car. Ask your fiancé, she shouted back. My who? Wait, Cheyenne, wait! But it was no use. She was already driving away. He turned to Carrie, who was trying desperately not to smirk. What the hell happened? Who's the bride? Now was the perfect moment. They needed to defuse the situation and let him know how she felt so he wouldn't have to fend off the competition. I don't know where she got the idea that I was your fiancé, but she asked about our relationship and I told her how I felt about you. How do you feel about me? Come on, Chandler, you should know by now. I was in love with you from the first time I saw you. It was fate that my mom and your dad fell in love. I'll admit, I helped that a little. What do you mean, helped? Well, I figured that if they liked each other and spent time with each other, we'd have more time to be together, so I made some inquiries about your father. I kept telling my mom about a guy I liked in high school and his cool dad who was on TV and owned a ranch. When I got the opportunity to introduce them, I took it. I don't believe that, Chandler said aloud, but not addressing anyone in particular. Was this whole thing some kind of conspiracy so you could spend time with me? Well, I have to admit, it worked out a lot better than I expected. I didn't expect them to fall in love and get married. I'm sorry about Dad, but Mom says he's not a bad guy and will probably marry someone younger and prettier than her. God, that's a nightmare, he said with conviction. Has it ever occurred to you, Carrie, that I might not love you? You will, she replied with a confident smile. Chandler. She was about to continue the argument, but when she touched his arm, he jumped back as if she had stung him. No, just leave me alone, Carrie. Just leave me alone. I don't want to see you or talk to you right now. Take care of the horses. Me? You want me to do all this? You've watched me a dozen times. You know what to do. But he didn't give her a chance to finish. Leaving her in the yard, he turned and went into the house himself. He wanted to talk to his father, but he was sitting at the kitchen table with Julie, both of them smirking. What's going on? The station just called. They want me back at work Monday morning. The message was greeted with far less enthusiasm than they'd expected. Good for you. I'm going to go to my room, he said before leaving. Jim looked at Julie. I wonder what's gotten into him. You should go in there and find out, she replied. Something's wrong. The father knocked on Chandler's door and was invited inside. The young man was lying on the bed with his arms folded behind his head. Jim pulled a chair out from under the table and sat down. What's going on, son? You were acting pretty rough back there. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. It's just, when you were dating Julie all the time, didn't you feel guilty about dating a married woman? Ah, that's it. Why now? We've been dating for months. Why does it bother you now? Cheyenne was furious when they came back from class. She said we had to find a new teacher for Carrie. I think it has something to do with you and Julie. Oh shit, I hope they don't find out about this. What about it, Dad? Didn't you feel guilty about it? Maybe a little, at least at first, but Julie is a special woman. I haven't felt this way about anyone since your mother died, and I can make her a lot happier than her husband ever could. The world is made up of two kinds of people, Chandler, winners, and losers. In this case, I was the winner, and Axel was the loser. Sometimes that's just the way it goes. Chandler was disappointed. He had hoped his father would come up with some way to justify what he had done, but instead, their conversation had only made things worse. Yeah, I guess so, he replied, before turning his back to his father. I'm just going to lie down for a bit, Dad. The drive home did nothing to lessen Cheyenne's anger. Before she even got out of the car, she fumbled for Frey's business card in her purse and dialed the number. Walter Frey. Mr. Frey, this is Cheyenne Bennett. His heart beat faster. He prayed she had good news for him. He wasn't going to be disappointed. And I think the man you're looking for is Jim Freeman. You mean the news anchor at CCS? That Jim Freeman? Yes, I'm pretty sure he had an affair with that guy's wife. Carrie, that's the daughter, said she and her mother moved into his house about 3 weeks ago. That's right around the time that guy was stabbed to death, isn't it? Yeah, almost the same day. Carrie didn't say if she had any contact with her father after he disappeared? No, she said he got into a fight and his phone was broken, so she couldn't talk to him. Gee, how does the daughter feel about that? I mean, has she put up with it, or do you think she wants to be with her father? Oh, she's not just resigned to it. She's excited about Freeman's baby. His name is Chandler. She says she's going to marry him after her mom marries his dad. It all sounds like a trashy romance. She went on to recount the entire conversation she had had with Carrie. Frey frantically wrote down everything Cheyenne said and reread it with her to make sure he hadn't missed anything. When he got to the keyboard, he was drooling. With no proof or answers, everything he would write would have to be in the form of a question, but it was enough to get him started. Is Jim Freeman, anchor of the 10 o'clock news on CCS, in a relationship with a married woman, and could that woman be the wife of our hometown hero, Alex Brolin, who was stabbed to death while fighting off 2 would-be kidnappers? Is Jim Freeman secretly keeping Mr. Brolin's wife and daughter at his ranch? If this is true, could it have anything to do with Mr. Brolin being stabbed or disappearing early this morning from Northwestern General Hospital? Stay tuned, because this reporter is determined to get to the bottom of this. The next morning, Jim Freeman was having breakfast with his new family when the phone rang. Geez, it's not even 9 o'clock yet. Who could be calling at... He paused and adopted a concerned look on his face when he saw the display. It's Bob Borski, my producer. He couldn't think of a good reason to call Bob on a Sunday morning, and for a second, he considered not answering. But that would only delay things. As he connected to the receiver, a bad feeling swept over him. Hi, Bob. To what do I owe this beautiful Sunday morning? He asked, trying to speak cheerfully. You can, Bob, but you obviously didn't see it. This blogger, Frey Fax, knows the whole story. He knows you're dating this Brolin woman, and he knows she's living in your house. He even suggests that maybe you had something to do with her husband's disappearance. But you didn't do that, did you? Freeman's heart sank lower and lower with each word. But it was the last phrase that sent him into a panic. Of course not, he replied angrily, then remembered who he was talking to and lowered his voice. Bob, how can you even think of such a thing? Christ, we've known each other for years. Yeah, okay, but you better think about how you're going to pull this off, Jim. Maybe you can get people on your side by saying you're desperate after your wife died or something. I don't know. Right now, you're aloof. Bob, you can't do that. I have a contract. Yes, we can, Jim. Read your contract. There's a little clause in there that gives us the right. If you do something harmful to the station, I think it falls under it, don't you? At least give me a chance. It's not up to me, Jim. It comes from the top. I got a call from the station master at 7 o'clock this morning. I'll be honest with you, Jim. Things aren't going well. I'll do what I can, but I'm not going to take any chances for you. Okay, Bob, I understand. But if they want to buy me out of my contract, tell them I won't settle for less than the full $4 million. Well, we'll see how things go. Hopefully it won't come to that. In the meantime, you get busy figuring out how to pull it all off. Jim agreed and said goodbye, then looked at Carrie. What the hell did you say to your writing instructor yesterday? He asked in an angry voice. Carrie looked a little surprised. Nothing. Why? I guess there must have been something. Chandler said she quit after she got back from your lesson yesterday. You must have said something. I was just talking about Chandler and me, that's all. Chandler joined the conversation, turning his attention to Carrie as well. You said you confessed your love to her. What? Jim and Julie exclaimed simultaneously in amazement. Carrie looked around at the astonished faces. Yeah, she was hitting on him, and I had to explain to her what was going on. The main thing is that no matter what you said, you got the girl on the trail, and she went to the blogger and told her everything. They suspended me because of an article online. It even said I had something to do with your father's disappearance. If I don't find a way to make things right, they might fire me. Axel was becoming more and more adventurous. He had run out of landscapes to paint in his room, so he began leaving for the desert early in the morning and only returning after sunset. His room was cluttered with dozens of beautiful watercolor paintings scattered in every corner and flat surface he could find. His reputation was spreading. He'd already let the maid pick out one painting for free, and he'd let the motel manager take three in exchange for 2 more weeks of free rent. One painting he considered his best so far. At first he thought about selling it, but the more he looked at it, the more he thought about doing something else with it. By then he had a front row seat with the manager, Ben Sandler. He had also learned that it was Ben's daughter, Charlene, who had been the one checking him out when he first arrived. After enjoying another continental breakfast and coffee, which he had grown accustomed to, he approached the counter. "Hey, Ben. Axel, how's it going?" "Good. Do you know anyone in town who makes custom frames? I bought some cheap frames from Susie, but I have one picture I'd like to have framed nicely." "Yes, Axel. Susie makes frames for some of the other artists around here." "Really? I didn't see any signs or anything like that. I didn't realize she was doing that." "Well, I guess she thinks it's common knowledge." "Okay, thanks, Ben. I'll give it a try." Susie's eyes almost popped out of her forehead when she saw the picture he walked in with. "Susie, Ben tells me you do custom frames. I'd like this picture framed with a double passport. Also, could you please package it so it's safe to ship? I want to send it to someone in Illinois." "Yes, of course, Axel, isn't it? You've come in here a few times already for supplies." "Yes, Axel Brolin. I'm staying at the Tory Motel." "Nice to meet you, Axel. I must say this is very beautiful," she said, holding out the painting. "Thank you. I haven't painted in decades, but the scenery here is so breathtaking that I had to try to capture some of the colors." "Well, you certainly succeeded. Do you have anything else like that?" "Ah, well, this is probably my best so far, but I have a bunch of others in my room." "Can I come in and look at them sometime?" "Sure, I'm usually off painting in the afternoon, but just let me know when you want to come over and I'll be there." Susie wanted him to see the framed painting before packing it up for shipment, so they made an appointment for the next day. Even Axel was impressed with how good the painting looked after it was framed. He told her she did a great job and said he would be back the next day to pick up the painting. He was impressed again when he stopped by to pick up the painting. Shipping a framed painting with glass can be very difficult, but she did everything very professionally. Looking at the store, he would never have thought she was capable of such a job. He paid her and walked her to the local post office. That night, the phone rang in his room. He looked at it, wondering who could be calling. He had only lived here for a few weeks, and this was the first time the phone had rung. He cautiously answered the call. "Hello?" "Hi, Axel, it's Susie. I was wondering if you might be interested in an offer." He listened as she told him about her idea. He didn't see anything wrong with it. At worst, he would have a framed picture. Hanging up the phone, he looked for a suitable painting and brought it over the next day after breakfast. Susie decided it was perfect. That same day, she framed it, attached a price tag, and hung it in a prominent place whenever anyone came into the store. Axel got curious and looked in there before closing time. "Gosh, Susie, $350, isn't that too much?" "No, not at all. Don't forget I'm charging you $45 for framing plus 30% of the sale. That leaves you with $200. If the painting doesn't sell, we can always lower the price, but I've already got a few takers." 2 days later, she called his room again. "Let's try for 3 this time." "So you've already sold it?" "Yes, and the guy is still in town. He's staying with his family for about a week. He was disappointed we only had one, so I told him to come back in 3 or 4 days." "Okay, I'll bring 3 more tomorrow morning." The next morning, Susie was delighted with the 3 paintings he had chosen, and after lunch she framed them and put them on display. 3 days later, she sold another painting to the same man, and he considered one more before leaving the next day. Over the next few weeks, he sold 2 more paintings and received his first commission. The more he painted, the better he got. The better he got, the better he wanted to become. He remembered that he had once read as a child that if an artist got to the point where he stopped striving for perfection, he would find something else to do. It would never become his problem. He watched YouTube videos and ordered books by artists he admired. He was his own worst critic and scrutinized every painting, scoping out places that needed revision. As full and rich as his days were, in the evenings he was still haunted by thoughts of his wife and daughter. Sometimes he wished they were there to share in his success. Sometimes he just wondered how they were doing. And sometimes the resentment and despair would return. With renewed vigor. Life on the JBC ranch wasn't easy. Jim tried to print stories about his wife's tragic death, but no one wanted to publish them. In just a few weeks, he went from respected journalist to persona non grata. Of course, he blamed Carrie for everything, which caused a real quarrel between him and Julie. Chandler barely spoke to her, and he and Carrie were losing friends at school. Jim truly exploded when the police swooped in and asked him what he knew about Axel Brolin's disappearance. "I don't believe it," Jim shouted. "The cops are seriously on the case. It's all Carrie's fault." "You don't know that for sure," Julie shouted back. "You said yourself that some of these bloggers are like bulldogs. Why don't we hire a private investigator to track down Axel? He's got to be around here somewhere." "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Bring the press right to him so he can tell everyone how after 19 years of marriage we just blindsided him. Well, at least the cops will know you had nothing to do with his disappearance. I'm not going to waste my money looking for that asshole." "Hey, Axel's not an asshole. He was a good husband and a good father. It's not his fault we fell in love." Jim thought for a moment. "You and Carrie need to find somewhere else to live for a while." "What? Oh, Jim, come on." "Just for a while. Julie, I could lose everything, the ranch, everything. Didn't you say they'd have to pay you $4 million if they fired you?" "They're not going to give me the full amount. I was just trying to play hardball. I'll be lucky if I get $3 million. Do you have any idea how much it takes to run this place? Property taxes alone are a fortune. I'll get you an apartment. I think it's best if you don't live here until things settle down." By now, Axel had gotten used to the phone ringing in his room. He figured it was Susie asking him to send more pictures. "Hello?" "Axel." He didn't recognize the voice. "I can't believe I'm talking to you." He was still wondering who was on the other end of the wire. He knew it wasn't his wife or daughter. "Axel, that painting is gorgeous." It was a big clue. It was the woman he'd rescued that night. "Hi, Barbara. Did you like it?" "Oh, Axel, I loved it. I was so surprised when I got it. You know, your disappearance is a big mystery." "I wasn't really trying to disappear. I just didn't want to face all those reporters and tell them that my wife and daughter left me for someone else." "So how are you guys doing?" "Not so good. My fiancé and I broke up." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It's all for the best. I did a couple interviews after that story came out. Apparently he didn't like the way I talked about you." "Have you been following the story?" "What story?" "Oh, Axel, that story is all over the news. I haven't seen Jim Freeman on the news in a long time, and I wonder if he's been fired." "I remember him. He was a news anchor at CCS. Why would they fire him?" "Oh, wow. You have no idea, do you? Jim Freeman is the guy your wife went to live with." "Yeah. Yeah, when it got out that he was having an affair with the wife of the hero who saved me, everyone turned against him. I don't mean to sound vindictive, but I hope they fired him. If there's this much press, it's unlikely other stations will want to hire him. Hopefully, he'll be working at the steel mills." She grinned. "I think that's quite possible." "So, you listed this hotel as your return address. Are you living there now?" "Well, for the last few weeks. Why?" I I was thinking of visiting you." She was afraid to ask because she remembered how he wanted to be alone in the hospital, but she was very pleasantly surprised. He remembered the tears in her eyes when she left him at the hospital. "I'll even pay for your ticket." "Yeah, but this place is a little out of the way. Let me check the airlines and see what's available." The next week, Axel followed her on the hour-long trip in a joyous mood. She literally threw herself into his arms as soon as she saw him. Normally, something like this would have taken him by surprise, but it felt good to hug her. He almost didn't want to let her go. On the way back, the conversation didn't die down. He told her he'd gotten her a room at the same motel where he'd stayed. "For a small town," he told her, "there are some very good places to eat here. I booked us a table for 7 at the swankiest place in town. I've been wanting to go there for a long time, but I didn't want to go alone." During the day, Axel pretended to be a tour guide, and after an extremely pleasant dinner, he escorted her to her room. He wanted to offer to let her stay the night, but he didn't want her to get the impression that that was the reason he had paid for her ticket. Same at 8 o'clock the next morning, someone knocked on his door. Good morning, Axel. I hope it's not too early. She caught a glimpse of his room. My goodness, Axel, this is just wonderful, she said, as she sauntered around the room. Thank you. I get out into the desert almost every day and paint. My being here doesn't interfere with your work? No, absolutely not. As you can see, I have a pretty good range. I'd love to go with you one day and watch you paint. I wouldn't mind, Barb, but there are no restrooms here. Why don't you be a gentleman and turn away? Sure. That's good enough for me. On the fourth day of her visit, they traveled into the desert. True to his word, Axel turned away every time she needed, as she put it, a peck. She did the same for him, but he could hear her giggling. Later that evening, she knocked on his door. She needed to say something to him and she couldn't wait any longer. He invited her in and they sat on the bed. Axel, you're going to think I'm crazy, but when I saw you in the hospital, I fell in love with you. He didn't look as surprised as she thought he would. Let me explain. There were other people around that day, and from the way I was screaming, you can't say they didn't hear me. One was even taking video on her phone, but none of them lifted a finger to help until you left the bar. Did they ever get caught? Oh yeah, the prosecutor was going to try to track you down, but there were so many videos he didn't have to. Anyway, after the surgery you were out for a couple days and didn't even know I was there. But when I looked at you, I saw an honest man. I know the circumstances you were in when you rushed those people, but I know you would have done it anyway. Those few days were the best days of my life. Axel was forced to admit that after all these years, he was actually doing what he loved and had a woman who loved him for who he was. But, Barb, we've only known each other for a few days. I know, it's crazy, I know, but my mom and dad got married 6 weeks after we met, and they love each other as much today as they did on their wedding day. I'm not suggesting we get married tomorrow or at all. Wyatt Earp and Josephine have been together for over 40 years but never consummated their marriage. I just want to go where you go and spend time with you. If you decide to stay here, I want to stay here too. If you decide to move or keep moving, I'd like to come with you. What about your life in Illinois? Sure, you have a job and friends. Are you really willing to give all that up to be with me? Absolutely, she said firmly. But the big question is, how do you feel about me? It was a question he had asked himself several times over the past few days. For some reason, he felt attracted to her. Was it love or infatuation? Barbara smiled broadly. You know we're going to make love tonight, right? I'm ready if you are, he replied. A week later, they found an apartment and moved in together. After another week, Axel already knew he had made the right choice. It was as if he had found the other half of himself. He didn't think life could be better, but he was about to be proven wrong. He finally bought a new cell phone, mainly so Barbara could contact him if she needed him. It was one of the few days she didn't accompany him into the desert. He was just casting shadows over his current painting when the phone rang. Hello. Axel, it's Susie. You need to come over right away. His first thought was of Barbara. It's Barbara. Is she hurt? No, she's fine. There's someone I need you to meet. Can it wait a bit? I'm just working on a new painting. No, you need to get your ass in gear and come here. How far away are you? About 35 minutes, I guess. Okay, hurry up, I'm serious. He was a little annoyed that he had to leave the painting unfinished, but Susie hadn't given him any cause for concern yet. When he walked in, she took her time introducing him to the other gentleman. Axel, this is Lyle Westkoff. He's an agent for several artists. He likes your work and wants to represent you. He had no idea what she was talking about. Represent me? Mr. Westkoff joined in. Mr. Brolin, have you ever seen articles about artists in magazines? Seen their work on covers, calendars, or postcards? Have you ever wondered how these artists became so popular? My job is to make you popular. They sat down and talked, working out the details. Axel beckoned to Barbara and asked her to attend. When they finished talking, he looked at her. So what do you say? Axel, I'll agree with whatever you decide, but I don't think there's any downside here. It seems like all you have to do is keep painting, and we both know you'll never stop. Axel studied the contract and didn't see any fine print. It was actually quite simple, and he signed it. Mr. Westkoff wasted no time. Within the first month, Axel was already featured on 2 calendars. Jim waited until it was known that he had been fired. When he was told the buyout amount on his contract, it was a token sum. "No way," he exclaimed. "Do you really think you can get away with this? I've worked at the station for 6 years and you treat me like this." "I thought you'd react this way, Jim. I went to the top and told them so, but they showed me the decline in viewership. They said if you don't like it, you can sue. But when they explain how you've hurt the station, they're sure the courts will side with them. You have 72 hours to sign the contract, or the offer will be considered null and void." Jim called several lawyers, but none of them were encouraging. He found himself between a hammer and anvil. He scribbled his name on the dotted line with anger and then sent out pre-written resumes. He couldn't believe that after such a long career he'd had everything knocked out from under him so quickly. He wanted to blame Julie, but he couldn't deny his involvement in the whole scandal. He knew he couldn't leave the ranch. There was barely enough money for the next 2 mortgage payments. He contacted a realtor and told her he would set a price to sell it. When she hadn't heard from Julie for a long time, despite his request that she not visit him at the ranch, she drove there and saw a "for sale" sign in the yard. Her heart dropped. He couldn't do this, she told herself. She tried to call him again, but as usual, the call went to voicemail. When Carrie learned that her heartbreaker had left without leaving an address, she burst into inconsolable tears. When they returned to the house, they saw that the neighbors, who liked Axel and assumed he would return someday, were making sure the lawn was mowed. When they entered the house, they immediately burst into tears as the familiar surroundings brought back happy memories. "Mommy, he's not coming back, is he?" "I'm afraid not, sweetheart." "What are we going to do?" "Well, I have to get a job. I hope I can earn enough to stay in the house, otherwise we'll have to rent an apartment." 2 years later, Axel and Barbara were happier than ever and decided to legalize their marriage. Barbara wanted a child, but they didn't want it to be born out of wedlock, so he did everything he could, including getting down on one knee at the first restaurant he brought her to on the first night they met. 11 months later, they were the proud parents of a healthy son. Mr. Westkoff was doing an excellent job of bringing Axel closer to millionaire status, so he and Barbara bought a beautiful house overlooking the desert. By then, Jim Freeman had already managed to work 2 jobs. He had gotten used to a warm room, sitting at a desk, and reading from a teleprompter. Now he was back to where he'd started, a reporter at a small station in Bismarck, North Dakota, freezing his feet off while covering sled races. Carrie glanced in the magazine section, shopping with her mother. "Mommy, Mommy!" she shouted as she walked down 2 aisles. She ran up to her mom with the magazine. "This is Daddy," she said, showing Julie the article. And there were 3 pages of his artwork and a short article about him, his wife, and son. Julie couldn't hold back a smile. "I'll be damned. He always wanted to be an artist, and it looks like he finally got his way." It also says here that he's married. Have you ever been divorced? "Oh yes, a long time ago. I filed the papers almost immediately. He signed the papers while he was in the hospital. Of course, I didn't know he was there then. In retrospect, I can say it was the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life." "Well, at least things turned out for the best for one of us," Carrie stated sadly. The end. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next videos.